The Sacred Mass, Chapter 19, Safe House. Helmer wrapped his arms around Caron, and Caron started crying, and he whined. I couldn't do anything for Gregory. It's okay, sweet Caron. You have done plenty for him, said Helmer, petting Caron's back, and he was happy till Eric showed up. And geez, why did he have to come and scare Gregory? Protested Allan, dusting himself up. And he added, he might pop up later, and when he comes for you, Caron, try to pay attention to your surroundings. And Sophine's the only one who can handle Eric, so don't try anything stupid. He will not harm Gregory, but I can't say the same thing for you. It's fine, said Sophina, petting Caron's hair, and she added, Eric is just super stressed with work, and he wants to spend time alone with Gregory. And Caron's face twisted in undisguised fury and anger, and Sophina added, relax. By time alone, I meant literally time alone. And Eric despises intercourse, and he was a former slave, and he suffered much before he was eventually rescued. And it's a touchy subject, one that I'm not at liberty to discuss freely, and when Eric comes for you, go easy on him. Alec put it back on his shoes, and then he said, yawning, well, the rescue was a bust, and if you need me, I'm going to the club. Ciao. Nobody needs you, Alex, said Sophina as Alec passed by. You are still not going to forgive me, are you? Said Alec, and even if you don't arouse, we can still spend some time together. You have a very lovely mouth and a bed that ties posterior. And now, said Sunshine with exasperation, and she ran ahead of Alec to get away from his flirtatious remarks. That she has sailed, Alex, said Allan, laughing, and then he added, turning seriously, take it from an expert, you do not need a front to experience pleasure from the back. As soon as Alec was out of the basement, he was compelled to ask Sophina, and pray do tell, what kind of racket are you running here? Is this a guild or a madhouse? Can it be both? Said Sophina, laughing nervously. This constant state of fear and uncertainty is enough to drive one mad, don't you think? Alec returned Caron home, and Caron had a despondent look on his face as if all of the life had been drained. And Allan got Caron cleaned up and he placed him in bed. And Caron pretended to fall asleep, and Allan watched Caron for a bit, and he drew near Caron, and then he gave Caron a light kiss, and then another and another. And before getting away, Allan teleported away from temptation. And then smiling, he said, good night, sleeping beauty. And when Allan finally left the room, Caron opened his eyes and he started crying and mumbling angrily. And after 2 hours like this, Caron quieted down, and he had a searing headache that felt as if somebody was hammering a nail to his temple. And he got up from bed to take a pill to treat the headache, and after treating it, he noticed that there was somebody behind him. And he opened his mouth to scream, but a hand covered his mouth, and the other hand restrained both his arms behind his back. And he struggled for a bit, but then he surrendered to the hopelessness of the situation. A familiar voice whispered, I am going to take you to see Gregory, but only if you promise to behave yourself. If you try to fight me, I will break you. And Eric stopped covering Caron's mouth, and Caron said meekly, please let me see Gregory. And Eric had dragged Caron out of the bathroom, and with his free hand he rummaged through Caron's things, and he found the small pouches with the patterns of the precious stone, and he tied them to his belt, and then he opened the closet to look around. We have similar motifs, only that he's taller, explained Caron with a weepy tone. And Eric put some clothing over his shoulder, and then he stuffed his pockets with undergarments. And Caron added, can you leave a note for my brother? I do not want him to worry. Later, said Eric flatly, and then he teleported with Caron. Outside the house, Lotte and Mincy were observing the situation, and Lotte asked Mincy, so were you able to track him? And Mincy shook her head in response, and then Lotte said, I guess we're going to have to wait for another opportunity. And Mincy wrote a note to Lotte to tell her he will probably come for Lord Julian tomorrow. Eric teleported Caron to a small wooden house built in the cliffside, and the house overlooked a small forest, and beyond it was the ocean. And the sky was clear, showing all the stars in the sky. And at the moment the twin moons were crescent, both facing one another, and visually both moons looked the same, though one was bigger and further away from the other. Yeah, like the moons look like twins, but but the bigger moon is further back, but because of like the visual distances, they both look identical. All the living spaces were connected by a balcony that faced the ocean, and from the darkness, Caron could make out some potted flowers that were decorating the balcony. Under the moonlight, Caron saw the silhouette of Eric, and Eric opened a pair of bifolds. And Caron cautiously entered the room, and Gregory had felt Caron aright, and he stretched his hands in greeting. And Caron ran to him, and Caron was trembling like a leaf, and Gregory kissed his forehead soothingly, and Eric closed the blinds, and then he left for his own bedroom. "Please don't be mad at Eric," said Gregory, smiling sheepishly. "How can I not be mad? He kidnapped you," protested Caron. "Heh, I could have escaped if I wanted to," lied Gregory. "If that's the case, let's go. You say you know all the spells, both the good and the bad, and the useless one as well," insisted Caron. "So, let's go. Teleport." Gregory sighed and said, "Knowing something and performing it properly are two different things, and to teleport correctly, you need to know where you are and where you are going, and I do not know where I am, therefore I cannot take us back. And the spell is difficult for me, and I once got a finger stuck inside a rock, and they had to amputate it, and it took months for it to grow back, and it is dangerous for someone who that spell is dangerous for someone who regularly miscasts. Because, like, if you miscast the teleport spell, you get, like, biologically fused to, like, inanimate objects when you mess up the landing." "So when you left for battle," asked Caron. "I flew there. I fly very quickly," said Gregory. "Then let's fly out of here," insisted Caron. And Gregory got up from the bed, and he went to the other room to see Eric, and he whispered, "Caron wants me to try to fly out of here." "You can indulge him if he pleases you," said Eric, getting out of the bed. And Caron wrapped his arms around Gregory's neck, and Gregory stretched his wings as far as he could. And then he jumped off the balcony, and he tried to get a strong wind. And after hearing Caron screaming like a peacock for a couple of seconds, Eric fetched Caron and Gregory before they splattered against the cliffside. And Eric dropped the both of them off on top of the bed before departing laughing. Eric returned with a scale, and he gestured to Caron to stand on top of it, and then he gestured to Gregory to do the same. And Caron was surprised to know just how much lighter Gregory was, and Eric explained, "Gregory's bones are hollow like those of a bird, and this allows him to fly easily, but carrying others is a tall order for him, and at most he can only fly while carrying Julian, and that is because Lord Julian was born with hollow bones." And Caron, pouting, said, "You could have just told me you could not fly with me." "Would you have believed me, sweet Caron?" said Gregory, smiling. And Caron looked for an escape route, and then he said, "How about a boat? We can build one out of the trees." "We," asked Gregory, "I draw things and I cast little spells. Do you know how to build a boat?" moaned Caron, looking more distressed, and each time he came out with an idea, Gregory would poke holes into his escape plan. And eventually Caron sat on the floor, and he placed his head against his knees, and then he started crying, and he kept repeating, we can escape, what is going to happen now, what are we going to do now, God help us, we can escape." And Caron was dressed in the same way as he did whenever his mother's escape plans were foiled. And Eric, hearing him cry, hugged Caron's head, and then he whispered, and then he said sweetly, "Sweet child, don't cry, don't be afraid. Eric is going to take really good care of you. Everything's going to be all right." And Caron started to tremble like a leaf, and a murderous flame was growing within him, and all he needed was a target by the name of Eric to move back a few paces. And Gregory, worried, said, "Maybe we should put him back where you found him." "And do you want to go home, child?" asked Eric. "With Gregory," insisted Caron. "Wallen is no longer safe for Gregory. The rebels have put a high bounty on his head, and with that amount of gold, mercenaries are going to find him, and they will take him. And nobody knows of this island but me, and Gregory will be safe here," insisted Eric. And Caron's tremblings went down slowly, and Gregory showed Caron the bounty, and the rebels were offering 10 million gold coins for the dragon, and for that amount of coin, anyone who knew of Gregory's true nature could not be trusted. And Caron in the end had to admit that Eric was right to be concerned. Sophina and all the other guild members were having an emergency meeting to discuss the problem. If they suppressed the bounty, it would confirm the existence of a dragon. If they ignored it, it could motivate some hotshot adventurers to seek out the creature. And Lotta volunteered to serve as a decoy, but that idea was shut down by Sunshine. And dragons have managed to live a peaceful life by keeping their identities a secret. And if there was a new dragon appearance, it would cause more harm than good. After hearing Eric's explanation, Caron was forced to say, "I guess you were right about being paranoid, Eric. Now that you understand the full scope of the situation, let me worry about protecting Gregory the only way I know how. And for you, you can worry about keeping him happy," said Eric before departing. Caron lay back in the bed with his brow furrowed, and Gregory lay down with his head resting on Caron's chest, and pouting he said, "If you keep frowning like that, you're gonna get wrinkles." And Caron grew even more worried and somber, and Gregory started kissing Caron's forehead to try to remove the wrinkles, and Caron turned his back to Gregory and then he said, pouting, "I am not in the mood." "Boo, you are no fun. Eric said you were in charge of my happiness, and right now you're really bumming me out," said Gregory. "Good night," said Caron, closing his eyes to pretend to be asleep, and he even tried to make his breathing even. Gregory looked at Caron's back thoughtfully, and smiling he started to trace runes on Caron's back with his index finger, and the runes did not have any mana power in them, and he was simply writing in the words of magic everything he loved about Caron. And after 10 minutes of this, Caron turned around and he grabbed Gregory's hand. "Did my love spell work?" asked Gregory, smiling. And before Caron could answer, Eric entered the room, and he was carrying Priscilla, and he handed the doll to Gregory, and he kissed Gregory's forehead and that of Priscilla, and chuckling Gregory said, "You forgot someone." And Eric returned and he kissed Caron on the forehead before the pouting and frowning Caron said, "And I thought I had problems falling asleep." And Gregory moved to the edge of the bed, and on the side of it he found Priscilla's doll bed, and he put Priscilla to bed before saying, "Good night, Priscilla." And Gregory then got out of bed and he left to see Eric, and then he kissed Eric's forehead, and then he said, "Try to get some sleep." And he whispered something else to Eric, but Caron was not able to listen to it. Eric smiled, and then he finally settled down to have a good night's sleep. And Gregory yawned, and then he went back to bed before saying, "Let's try to get some sleep." And Caron rested his head against Gregory's chest, and he unbuttoned the night glove to see the heart scale. And Caron focused on it, and slowly he relaxed, and he was finally able to sleep. Alright, that's the end of that chapter. Bye-bye, and God bless.